So our subject tonight, I'd like to get to it, is Pesach. Pesach is on the doorstep, and this is tonight is the first of our two-part series. So tonight we're going to look at practical halachic and some other aspects of Pesach, Pesach preparation and Pesach achievement. And then tomorrow night, also same time, 8 o'clock, but for just half an hour, we'll do Seder inspiration in the usual Thursday night slot. And of course, everyone is welcome. But I just wanted to sort of set out the program. So we will do, as I said, Seder inspiration, but that will be a separate unit for tomorrow evening. So I have a few items that I'd like to address, and there will be time for questions as well. And I hope to achieve that objective within the hour that we have allocated. So the first subject I want to talk about briefly is the sale of chametz. This is an important aspect of Pesach practice, Pesach observance. It was not widespread until probably about 200 years ago, maybe a bit more. Probably it was first, let's say, popularized as a technique, as a halachic principle. The halachic principle goes back to the Talmudic times, but it became implemented in a kind of wide-scale practice in the 17th century for people who were in the spirits business. Also, there were occasions where Jewish people, either they were innkeepers or maybe they acquired spirits, whiskey and the like, as a deposit for a loan or as payment for a loan, or they acquired it because a debtor defaulted on a loan. So there were various scenarios where there were Jewish people, Jewish households that found it very difficult to actually consume or divest themselves entirely of all of their chametz. And little by little, the idea of selling chametz and then hopefully purchasing it back after the festival became widespread. And for the last maybe 200 years or so, it has become nearly universal. It's very simple to do. I'm happy to serve as your agent for that role, or you possibly have access to another rabbi. And I would say that although you can do it online, there are websites that would help you. It's not ideal. I'm not saying it isn't valid. It's not ideal. It's better to do it in a way that you actually sign a document and you submit it. You can submit it electronically. It's best, even better, to do it in person with the rabbi who does a kinyan, to formally accept your appointment of him as your agent to sell your chametz. And this, as I said, can be done anytime up until Pesach. And by all means, you can get to it at your convenience. You can get it if you are on our mailing list. You will see it there. You can also find it, I think, on our website. If not, it should be on our website. And certainly, you can pick one up at Kesher. It's not muktzah. You can get one on Shabbos even. Don't fill it out on Shabbos. Okay, sale of chametz is an important aspect, an important, let's say, strategy that we employ to fulfill the mitzvah of divesting ourselves of chametz, and also to avoid the transgression of owning chametz on Pesach, which of course the Torah forbids. Let's talk now about some of the practical aspects of preparing the home for Pesach, and especially the kitchen. And I'd like to say that there are notes which are going to go up on our website, hopefully by tomorrow, that you can find on our website, and will also be included in our Friday mailing that we send out normally every week on Friday. So the notes that I am going to draw upon now will be available in that way, but they should be on our website as well from tomorrow in the Ask the Rabbi page. And if you scroll down to Pesach, you'll find it on the Pesach Q&A section there. I think it should be up by tomorrow for your convenience. So I'd like to just for tonight deal with some of the most important aspects of preparing the home for Pesach. And the first point I want to make is that although we seek to clean our homes thoroughly in preparation for Pesach, because of the sale of chametz that we just mentioned, if a person does not discover packet of pretzels or something like that is languishing in a closet or in a child's jacket pocket or something like that, even though to eat it on Pesach certainly is forbidden, and to own it is also forbidden, but the sale of chametz enables us to be free of that particular transgression, and therefore, strictly speaking, it is not imperative to identify and to expose and to expunge every last crumb. It may be meritorious to do so, but I want to kind of lighten the burden for the righteous women of Israel and the men as well in this connection. So when we talk about preparing the home for Pesach, of course, the main focus needs to be on the place where food is consumed, which is going to be the kitchen and the dining room. Even in the dining room, again, we're looking for a piece of chametz which is larger than a kazayit, which is the size of a large olive, which is about 30 cc's, which is about, well, it's more than a cubic centimeter. So we're talking about a fairly substantial piece of chametz, something which is less than that, which has been overlooked or which is under a sofa or something like that. One doesn't have to, as I say, expend a lot of energy and anxiety on locating it and expunging it. When we talk about the kitchen, of course, there one has to be a lot more careful, and especially the kitchen appliances, kitchen utensils. So I got my notes here, as I've just mentioned, that are will be on our website shortly, and perhaps we'll talk just about some of the essentials, and we'll leave some of the other details for your convenience to peruse at your convenience. So the countertops. Many have the minhag of covering surfaces in the kitchen, tables and countertops. This is based on a statement or a ruling of one of the medieval commentators, Maharil, who lived in 14th century Germany. And he said that it's not practical to actually kasher those surfaces. They need to be covered. Or in his day, they would sometimes get a carpenter's plane and to actually shave off a few millimeters of the thickness of the table or the countertop. Now, this, for the most part, is not essential for us nowadays. The circumstances are different. And insofar as tables are concerned, although many do have the minhag to cover them with plastic, that's what we do at home, to be honest, but it's not essential to do so. It's sufficient to clean them and to keep it covered with a tablecloth or something like that during the course of Pesach. Now, the countertops, again, many have the minhag to cover them either with contact paper, with cling film, which I don't know how reliable that is, or with other options. Some have heavy-duty aluminum foil, some have covers that are made specifically custom-made for Pesach, and these are all popular and meritorious measures. Strictly speaking, it is sufficient to kasher them with boiling water or to cover them. Some do both, but again, the need to do both is questionable. Now, let's talk about what I just said now, kashering with boiling water. So this is important for the sinks, especially, more so than the countertops even. And that involves using a kettle. You can use a Pesach, dedicated Pesach kettle is ideal, an electric kettle, that we use for boiling hot water, for hot drinks. If you don't have one, especially for Pesach, you can make use of the same one you use the rest of the year as well. If you don't use it for 24 hours, if you clean it carefully, and then you can make use of it to kasher your kitchen in the following manner. You need to fill it nearly to the top. You need to turn it on, wait for the water to boil. And when it's on a rolling boil, then you need to pour it over the sink. Now, when I say to pour it over the sink, it has to be maintained on a rolling boil, which for reasons of physics and for reasons of product safety only extends for a few seconds. After you take it off of the unit where it's drawing the charge, it will only last for a few seconds at that rolling boil. And during that time, you need to pour it onto your sink, all the surfaces of the sink. Now, the sink needs to be dry before that, and it needs to be clean before that. It's best not to use the sink for hot chametz for 24 hours before that as well. So you can use the sink, but don't use it for hot water. You can use it with warm water, but don't use it for hot chametz for 24 hours before you kasher. You've got to clean it, you've got to dry it, and then you pour the boiling water over it in that way. It might be possible to do it, depending on the size of your kettle, etc., in one go. It may be necessary to do it a second time as well. The boiling water needs to reach all of the surfaces, the floor of the sink and the sides of the sink as well. I'm assuming you have a metal sink. If you have a sink of another material, then we don't have a reliable way to kosher it, and it's best to use an insert, like a plastic container or something that would go into the sink, and you put the dishes in there as circumstances may require. Now, the tap of the sink is also needs to be koshered in a similar way, in that manner as well. With regard to an oven, so again, a lot has been written about it. I like to be brief. If you have a pyrolytic oven, then that is great. You do the pyrolytic setting, and it reduces any soiling, any staining, essentially to ash. This is a wonderful device for Pesach preparation. If you don't have a pyrolytic oven, then you might want to consider getting yourself a Pesach present that you can use all year round. And the next time you replace your oven, get a pyrolytic oven. But it is more expensive, it has to be said. They tend to be the high specification types of ovens. If you don't have a pyrolytic oven, don't panic. We have not had pyrolytic ovens in use for all that long. And although it's a modern convenience, you can get by without it as well. The oven needs to be cleaned carefully using a strong cleansing agent. I would say something which even has warnings about toxicity and that sort of thing, because that ensures that whatever chametz may still be there, or whatever stubborn stains may be hard to remove, will be rendered inedible as a result. Obviously not in a way that's going to imperil the food, the quality and the safety of the food that you bake in your oven. But I'm just saying to use a strong oven cleansing agent in the usual way. Then it is sufficient to turn the oven to the highest temperature, leave it on for about 30 to 40 minutes, and that is sufficient to kosher the oven. You can put the racks in the oven at that time as well. Now, it is preferable that the racks or trays that you have in your oven, you should not put food directly onto them on Pesach. You should use it with like a silver foil, aluminum foil covering or something of that sort. That is preferable because the koshering that I just mentioned of turning it up to the highest heat represents what we call libun kal, like a second tier form of koshering. And ideally, we'd like to achieve the libun chamor, libun gomer, which is a higher level, which requires the pyrolytic approach. I should mention that even if you have a pyrolytic oven, the instructions will probably tell you to take the racks out of the oven, because actually they can be warped and bent as a result of the heat. If you leave them in, they probably won't come to any harm. They will be koshered as well, but they may be a little bit bent as a result. So I'm not saying that you need to do that. But as I said, it's proper to use some kind of covering for the racks and for the trays that you have in your oven during Pesach. A microwave, again, much has been written about it. Clean the microwave, cover the tray that you have circular or whatever shape it is. It may rotate. Cover it with saran wrap or plastic cling film or something like that. And the microwave itself can be koshered. Once it's clean, put a styrofoam cup in it and boil water in the styrofoam cup. Once it fills the cavity of the microwave, once the steam fills the cavity of the microwave oven, you can consider it kosher. It is proper, it's recommended to still use some cling film or contact paper or something to cover the glass door of the oven, because we don't favor koshering glass according to our Ashkenazic halachic tradition. We don't like to kosher glass. So I say we don't like to. It's doubtful in halachic terms whether glass can be koshered, and therefore it's preferable to cover the glass door of your microwave with contact paper or something of that sort that will avoid that particular problem. Just going to look at these notes very briefly to see if there's something salient that I have overlooked. Yeah, about the microwave, I have written here in the notes that if you have the counter space for it, and if you have the storage space for it the rest of the year, it's a good idea to invest in a separate microwave just for Pesach. They're not costly. You can get one for under £100. And then you don't have to worry about the kashering, etc., that I've mentioned. In general, to the extent that a person is able to make use of utensils and even appliances which are specific for Pesach, it is nice to do so. It may seem to be an indulgence to buy a separate item or separate set just for Pesach, but the convenience of it and the fact that usually you are able to use it year by year, for many years, actually makes it quite worthwhile. I have to say, when Ruth and I were first married, we did a lot of kashering for Pesach. Over the years, we have purchased or acquired Pesach sets of a lot of utensils and appliances even that we require, and it does make our lives easier that way, and halakhically it is a superior option as well. Actually, it's not in my notes, but I just want to mention the dishwashers. Nowadays, most dishwashers are metal. They can be kashered. It is proper, it's preferable to have separate racks, to get separate racks for Pesach. For your dishwasher, you can normally get them from the manufacturer. Get a separate set of racks for Pesach if possible. The dishwasher itself can be kashered by running it through a complete cycle, the most intense cycle, with detergent as well. And before you do that, you should clean out the drain. The drain in your dishwasher is designed to catch any residue, and there is like a sieve there which prevents it from going down into the plumbing system, and some of it will be collected there. Some of the detritus, some of the residue will be collected there. It's important to clean that, to clean it out carefully, and then run the dishwasher through a cycle, an empty cycle, and then you can use it for Pesach. It is, as I say, preferable to have Pesach racks as well. If that's not possible, let me know. We can discuss it further depending on certain details. It's a good idea, though, to get Pesach racks. Again, it's an investment that will pay off over time if you have the storage space for it as well. Okay, I am happy to answer questions at the end if you have other questions about preparing the home for Pesach, but because I'm conscious also of the time, I'd like to go on to the next subject, which I want to discuss. As Pesach approaches, of course, the night prior to Pesach is the night of Bedikas Chametz. It's the first mission in Tractate Pesachim, or La'arba Asar. The night prior to Pesach, already the preparations have reached their conclusion, hopefully, and the search for chametz is undertaken when it gets dark, which is around 8:40 p.m. It's proper to begin the search for chametz when it gets dark, promptly at 8:40 p.m. or shortly thereafter. There is a bracha that we say, Al Biur Chametz, because the search for the chametz is the beginning of the expunging of the chametz. You can't remove it and destroy it or even burn it, as we'll talk about in a moment, unless you first find it. Of course, if you have no chametz at all, then that's great, because the whole idea is to remove the chametz in the days prior to Pesach. But many have the minhag of putting out 10 pieces of bread or 10 pretzels or 10 Cheerios or something like that. Some are careful to actually put it in a little plastic bag so that the crumbs don't inadvertently get lost. A child or an adult for that matter, could step on it, and the crumbs could then be distributed, which would be unfortunate. So you can wrap it in a little bit of foil or saran wrap, cling film or something like that. It's not, again, required. One can make the bracha and one can search for the chametz, and even if you don't find any, then you can still fulfill that. You can still make the bracha, but many people do put out the as I say, pieces of bread or something like that. And that is the common minhag. The minhag is to put out 10 of them. Now, I was just asked on the questions, if a person is going away for going away for Pesach. So the mitzvah is specifically on the night before Pesach, and that's when we make the bracha. If you're going away before Pesach, and before the night before Pesach, which may well be the case, you should do bedikas chametz in your home, but without a bracha before you go. Now, maybe we'll talk more about that. Perhaps now is the time, actually, for those who are going away. So, again, I'm going to make it simple. The recommended approach is to designate, if you are going away for Pesach, so you are not going to access your home on Pesach, you're not at risk of inadvertently eating any chametz that, on Pesach, because it's still in your kitchen, and you have, you might inadvertently forget that it's Pesach, or have a drink of whiskey from your drinks cabinet. If you are here for Pesach, of course, you've got to localize all your chametz, and you've got to lock it away, or at least put it behind in a cabinet with a designation, chametz, or that sort of thing. If you're going away, then you can effectively fulfill the mitzvah of biur chametz through the sale of your chametz. Nevertheless, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of searching for chametz, the right thing to do is to designate one room in your home. It can be a living room, it could be a bedroom, it could be a hallway, and you do bedikas chametz in that place. You ensure there is no chametz in that place. The rest of the house you designate as a place where chametz may be, so to speak, sequestered. And because you leave the home, you lock the door, and neither you nor members of your family or friends or others are going to go into the house on Pesach, the sale of chametz that we employ will ensure that you have fulfilled the mitzvah of removing chametz from your home. Now, where you are, you should still do bedikas chametz on the night of the 14th. So if you're going to family, you're going to a hotel or something like that, it is proper to still do the mitzvah of bedikas chametz wherever you may be on the night of the 14th. But bedikas chametz in your own home, you can do the night before you leave. But as I said, it doesn't have to be the same comprehensive search and removal of chametz. You can just designate one place in the house that you're going to search. The rest of the house you can leave the chametz where it is, and you are relying on the sale of chametz, which you mentioned earlier. So for the rest of us who are going to be at home for Pesach, be sure that you find the 10 pieces of chametz that you put out. When I say you, like in our family, Ruthie puts it, or one of the children does, and I go searching for it. And be sure you find all 10. If you find 9, then you've got a problem. You've got to look for the other one. Of course, after the bedikas chametz at night, we say an important declaration, which is the bitul, where we nullify whatever chametz we haven't found. And in the morning, we are going to repeat that. Now, let's talk about the morning. The chametz that you find, the 10 Cheerios or whatever it may be, as well as other chametz that perhaps you have ravita or macaroni, a lot of chametz that a person may have. So if you are going to sell that chametz, then you may do so. Just be sure it's localized and put in a cabinet, or more than one, however many cabinets you may require, and label it as chametz, and be sure that it won't be inadvertently accessed on Pesach, even though it does not belong to you. Even though we make use of the sale of chametz, we also want to fulfill the mitzvah of burning the chametz. Now, you don't have to have a large bonfire. It can be something very modest. As I say, if you got 10 Cheerios or something like that, that's fine. It's proper, though, to save some chametz from the night before, or even from leftover from breakfast in the morning, in order to burn the chametz, to fulfill the mitzvah of what's literally called biur chametz, which is to expunge through fire the chametz. There's an opinion that certainly the classic way to destroy chametz is through burning. There's a symbolism to that as well. It goes up in smoke, and other symbolic aspects have also been advanced. So even if, as I keep saying, you're going to just do it in a very minor way, symbolic way, that's okay, but you should burn some of the chametz. There are some places where they have public chametz burning, locations. But as I said, you can do it in your own home. If you don't want to burn it, you can't burn it, or you're for safety or other reasons, you can dispose of it in other ways as well. It's not enough though just to put it in the trash, in the rubbish, because if it's on your property, then you haven't really removed it from your possession. So you need to deposit it in the public bins or something like that, or public repositories. I think Barnet Council is trying to help us in that regard as well. And or you can flush it down the toilet if it's a small amount that's not going to cause grief to the plumbing system. A couple of important times. The last time for eating chametz on Friday morning, not this coming, following Friday morning, Erev Pesach, is 10:04. And the time to burn the chametz, it has to be disposed of by 11:32. So we can eat chametz until 10:04 if you have to finish breakfast by that time. But the time after which one is not allowed to own any chametz is by 11:32. These times are also on the Kesher schedule as well. The Pesach times are there in print. Okay, I want to talk now for a few minutes about what is special for this year, because the things we've mentioned up until this point are pretty much uniform regarding Pesach preparations year by year. This year is distinctive, though, because Friday night is the Seder night. Now, last year was more dramatic, in which Erev Pesach was on Shabbos, and that gives rise to a whole range of halachic complications. This year, we have a much more narrow range of halachic complications. I would like to mention them because it doesn't happen that frequently that the Seder night is on Shabbos, is on Friday night. So let's talk briefly about some of the specifics that are pertinent to this year in particular. So, as we know, on Yom Tov, certain aspects of food preparation are permitted that on Shabbos are forbidden. So there are certain activities which a person in another year, or maybe typically he's accustomed to doing on the Seder night, but this year, because it's Shabbos, they have to be done in advance. So for example, the salt water that we use at the Seder, we dip the karpas in salt water. Some have the meaning of serving egg in salt water when we begin the meal. So we have a need for salt water, but the salt water needs to be prepared before Shabbos. And the reason is that salt water is used, or vinegar as well sometimes, is used in the process of tanning. And it's also used in the process of preserving, like pickling or preserving vegetables, and that is forbidden on Shabbos. And by rabbinic extension, even to make the mixture of salt water, if it's very strong, very salty, needs to be avoided as well. So prepare the salt water in advance, not very difficult to do. If you have forgotten to do so, then you can still prepare it with a shinui. That means to say to depart from the usual formula. Instead of adding the salt to the water, you can add the water to the salt, meaning put some salt in a glass or in a bowl, and then add the water to it. That's considered a shinui, a departure from the usual sequence for preparing salt water. A charoset is the same consideration. It's questionable about whether you can prepare it on Shabbos, depending on how fine you chop the nuts or the apple or the other ingredients, celery, other people that you may use in your charoset. Could be a problem of tochein. There could be a problem of gibul, which is like to mix together a liquid and a solid that creates a mixture of that sort, like kneading dough. Also, when you add flour and water, that is a malacha on Shabbos. So there can be issues with charoses. Therefore, it's proper to make it before Shabbos. Adding water or wine or any liquid to the charoses that you've made is allowed in any case, though, meaning if you've made it before Shabbos, and then you realize it's the consistency is too thick, or you want to add more wine for the sweetness or whatever it might be, you may do so on Shabbos. That's not a problem. According to the minhag, as you know, on the Seder table, we have an egg which is roasted, or a shank bone and a shank bone which is roasted. This is not possible on Shabbos. One is not allowed to roast them on Shabbos. That has to be done in advance. In general, preparations on Shabbos for Yom Tov should be avoided. It's actually true even from Yom Tov to Yom Tov. but you have a certain amount of flexibility there in certain cases. The preparation from Shabbos to Yom Tov, by which I mean the first day Yom Tov, which is Shabbos, to the second day, has to be avoided. And even something as simple and as logical and as urgent maybe as taking a nap on Shabbos afternoon because you're up late the night before, you're tired from all the Pesach preparations that we've been discussing, and that can be exhausting. So on Shabbos afternoon or morning, whatever time you want to take a nap, hopefully your children want to do the same, you're allowed to do so, but you shouldn't say explicitly, I'm going to take a nap because I want to be able to have energy to be alert for the Seder tonight. That's meritorious unto itself, but on Shabbos, you're not supposed to do something on Shabbos which is preparatory for after Shabbos. So if it's something that you want to do for its own sake, if you say, I'm so tired, or I'd really love to take a nap, Shena b'Shabbos ta'anug, what a delight it is. Today is Shabbos, I can take a nap. That's great. No problem with that. And even if your intention is for the night, that's okay, but you shouldn't say explicitly. My feeling is that for children, it probably is allowed. So if you've got children and you want them to take a nap because they're overtired, irritable, and you want them to be in a good spirits, you want them to be able to enjoy the Seder and to say the Manishtana and participate fully. So you're allowed to encourage them to take a nap so that they will be able to stay up for the Seder. I think in the case of children, it's that is allowed. If you say to the child, you've got to take a nap, he says, yeah, but I'm not tired. You say, well, you've got to take a nap. I can't tell you why. I think it's a bit ridiculous. So in the case of a child, you can say so that you'll have energy for tonight. But for an adult, a person in his own rhythm shouldn't say explicitly. It may seem like a very kind of picayune distinction, but as I say, Shabbos has its own sanctity and its own importance in its own right, and a person should not do something on Shabbos which is only, as I say, for after Shabbos. But as I certainly speak for myself, I think that I will be happy to take a nap for its own sake on Shabbos afternoon. Now, here's an interesting thing. What about Shalom Aleichem? We come home from shul Friday night, Leil HaSeder, do we sing Shalom Aleichem? Now, this is just a minhag. If you don't say it, if you don't sing it, then okay, everybody does his own. It's not a mitzvah per se. It's very widespread minhag. The question is, do we do it on the Seder night as well? So some do not say Shalom Aleichem. They do not sing the melody, the poem Shalom Aleichem on Friday night when it's Yom Tov, or even when it's Chol HaMoed. On Shabbos Chol HaMoed or on Yom Tov they don't. Some have that minhag that they only do it on Shabbos when it's not Yom Tov. But others sing Shalom Aleichem on Shabbos Yom Tov, but they don't do it on the Seder night because of the zrizut, because of the alacrity. They want to get started promptly with the Seder, and when we get home, it's proper to start the Seder by around by the time here 8:45, and a person you're not allowed to start before 8:45, but you should start promptly after 8:45 if you're able to do so. In other words, not to delay or not to introduce activities which will have the effect of delaying the beginning of Kiddush and the Seder that will follow. So Shalom Aleichem perhaps should be dispensed with for that reason. I have another idea. There are many who say it, in any case, Shalom Aleichem, even on the Seder night, but I'm just saying they're different to minhagim. I've got another thought as to maybe why we don't say it, specifically on the Seder night, because in the Nusach of the Haggadah, one of the themes which is emphasized quite almost emphatically, is it's not redundancy, is God redeemed us himself, not through an angel, not through a saraf, not through some kind of intermediary, but rather Hashem himself revealed himself to the Jewish people and took us out of Egypt. Now, it's likely, in my view, that this is at least in part, a refutation of the Christian notion that the relationship between God and mankind is through the intermediary, is through the agency of Oso Ha'ish, of the Christian Redeemer. And obviously we don't view it that way. We don't agree with that. and we reject that notion. And I suspect this is why we have such an emphasis that Hashem himself redeemed the Jewish people, not through any kind of intermediary. So since we say Lo alidei malach, it could be that that's why we don't want to begin the night by talking to the malachim, singing to the malachim, describing the malachim. So even though there's room for angels in our view of the world, angels are an important component of our worldview, so to speak. But we, on the Seder night, perhaps we don't want to linger on or emphasize the role of the malachim. I just mentioned there are some who don't sing Shalom Aleichem at all for that reason, because of the angels. They don't want to be talking to the angels or about the angels. They don't want to be asking the angels for a blessing, etc. Again, there are others who do sing Shalom Aleichem even on the Seder night, as you like. Blessing the children. So again, for those who have that minhag, probably we should do it on the Seder night as well. The Medrash says that it was the Seder night, the night of Pesach, when Yitzchak gave the bracha to Yaakov. And Rashi even alludes to it when he says that when Rivka said, Rivka told Yaakov, get me 2 goats, etc. That was the Seder night. It was for Korban Pesach, Korban Chagiga. So according to that Midrashic tradition, blessing the children would certainly be appropriate for the Seder night. And lastly, but not least, Eshes Chayil. So some skip Eshes Chayil along with Shalom Aleichem. In my opinion, the righteous women of Israel deserve it on the Seder night more than ever. And if it's on a Friday night, as it is this year, I think there's every reason to sing Eshes Chayil for the reason that I have mentioned. Okay, we've got a bit more time still. So let's talk about the Seder Leil Pesach itself. So I mentioned that the Kiddush should be undertaken should begin not before 8:45, but it should be promptly after 8:45, if possible. Firstly, it's already late, and we have a lot to accomplish, and we want to do so in a spirit of enthusiasm. And the later it is, the harder it is to achieve that. Besides which, the later you start, the later you finish. So it's but even besides those reasons, in halachic terms, it's proper to do kiddush, as I say, promptly at nightfall. Now, here's one for women. Many women have the minhag that they say the bracha of Shehecheyanu when they light the Yom Tov candles. And the basis for this actually is rather unclear. If you look closely in the Art Scroll Sidur, there's a turn of phrase like many women or some expression like that. It's a very widespread minhag. The reason for it is a bit doubtful. But in any case, because many women do say Shehecheyanu when they light the Yom Tov candles, and like this on Pesach, they'll say L'adlik ner shel Shabbos v'Yom Tov, and they will say Shehecheyanu. For those who do, on the Seder night, when we make Kiddush, we say Shehecheyanu then as well. So if the women are simply listening to the Kiddush that is recited by your husband, then you can say Amen to the bracha Shehecheyanu and Amen to the Kiddush, and that's fine. However, many have the meaning on the Seder night specifically that everyone says Kiddush together. That's what we do in our home, and many others do that as well. That everyone holds the cup of wine, even all of the guests, children, older children as well, maybe grape juice, whatever it might be, and we all say Kiddush together. If that is your minhag, and you have said Shehecheyanu when you lit the candles, then do not say Shehecheyanu a second time, because it's the same bracha essentially for the same purpose. So, and by the way, a man who lights Shabbos and Yom Tov candles certainly should not say Shehecheyanu at that time. If he does, then he would not say Shehecheyanu at all in the Kiddush formula. But better not to say Shehecheyanu at the time of candle lighting for a man, and to say it in the Kiddush where will appear in your Haggadah. I hope I haven't confused you too much. I'll just summarize. If for the women who say Shehecheyanu on Yom Tov when they light candles, if that's what your minhag is, that's fine. However, don't say the same Shehecheyanu a second time on the Seder night if your minhag is also to say Kiddush altogether. If you collectively, if you are listening to Kiddush, then that's fine. You can fulfill the mitzvah in that way. Once we hear the Kiddush, we recite the Kiddush, we say Bar Priyat Gafen, we sit down, maybe you're sitting already, and we recline to the left. And remember to lean to the left when we drink the wine. Excuse me, and we eat the matzah. Since I spoke about the women before, there's some discussion whether women are obligated in leaning. Possibly they're not obligated, but the Ramah, in a very famous, elegant comment, says that women who are distinguished should lean, and he says all of our women are distinguished, and therefore women, in my view, would be encouraged to lean to the left at the time that we drink the wine on the Seder night and when we eat the matzah as well. It's important to remember that according to the Halakhah, if a person fails to lean when he should, then he has to eat the matzah again, the mitzvah, or drink the wine again as well. The mitzvah has not been fulfilled correctly. Women probably would not have to do it again because there's a dispute whether they are obligated to lean in the first place. But again, let's do it right. Also, have the intent to fulfill the mitzvah. That's true for all 4 cups of wine, and it's true for the matzah that we eat at the Seder as well. Not all the matzah, but the first kazayit of matzah, when we make the bracha al achilas matzah, there's a special blessing that we recite for that mitzvah, and it's a Torah mitzvah that we fulfill on the Seder night. It's important to lean and to have in mind also that we're doing so in order to fulfill the mitzvah. Lastly, on this subject, there are some who include a short preamble of intent, like a statement of intent. It begins with the famous words, Hinini muchan umuzuman lekayem mitzvah. Behold, I am ready and prepared to fulfill the mitzvah of the first cup or the second cup, the mitzvah of achilas matzah. And there are various mitzvahs in the Seder night, and there are those who say, and you have it printed in your Haggadah, this prayer, it's of Kabbalistic origins. There are many who don't say it, but there are those who do. And its purpose is exactly what it says, to express and to remind myself that I am doing something that has a mitzvah value to it. It is part of my relationship with Hashem. It's part of the way that I engage with my own identity on the Seder night. And it's not only that I'm eating out of habit or hunger, or drinking wine because it's just the thing we do on the Seder night, which a lot of Jews probably do consume those things just with that kind of intent and rhythm, but that's not the true reason. That's not the real reason. The real reason is that it's a mitzvah, and it's proper that when we fulfill those mitzvot that we have in mind, I'm fulfilling a mitzvah in what I eat or drink. And that's true, by the way, for the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim as well. Now, I want to talk, but only briefly, about the amounts. In the past, we've discussed it in greater detail, and there are even charts that are easily available that will actually enable you to see how much matzah you require and how much moror in terms of the size and all of that. I don't want to dwell on that at length. Generally speaking, my friends, we who are motivated to keep the mitzvot in the right way, in the correct way, in the proper way, in the halachically authentic way, we probably eat more matzah to fulfill the mitzvah than is absolutely required. The shiurim that you find published and printed tend to be very generous shiurim, meaning the size, the proportions, and the amounts tend to be quite generous beyond really what the basic halacha demands. So I'm confident that unless someone is in a situation where he's not well or something like that, the requisite amount of matzah on the various occasions, afikomen and etc., we will eat, and the moror as well. I want to mention though the wine, because 4 cups of wine is a substantial amount, depending on what some people probably drink that amount, every night, but most of us do not, and I wouldn't recommend it for every night. Pesach night, Seder night is special, 4 glasses of wine. Normally the first glass, maybe the second one, we drink down. By the time we get to the 3rd or 4th, we we're flagging a bit. It's already late at night, we've eaten, and the wine doesn't appeal to us perhaps as much as the first 1 or 2 cups do. And therefore, some people might, in anticipation of that, already the first cup or the second cup, they're going to cut back. So I want to try to be clear here. The wine glass that you use should not be too large, because if it's too large, then you're going to end up drinking a lot more than the halacha requires. And, it may go to your head. It may be uncomfortable to do so. I'm recommending a wine glass which holds about 100 cc's, or a bit more, when you fill it, you should fill it to the top. It doesn't have to be to the very brim, but you should fill it, like a full glass. It's a symbol of blessing, of bounty, of divine beneficence. So it should be filled to the top. You don't have to drink all of it. You only have to drink more than half. So if you have a wine glass, like a typical wine glass, and you fill it to the top, doesn't have to be to the very brim, and you drink just over half of it, it's actually not that much wine. And if wine doesn't agree with you, then you can use grape juice. You can dilute it with water even if you need to do so. There's also low alcohol wine, which some people think is ghastly, but if that works for you, then you can go with it. So my point is that don't neglect the mitzvah of 4 cups of wine. I have in mind, especially the women here, don't neglect the mitzvah of 4 cups of wine. It is incumbent upon women as upon men. Again, if you can't drink wine, you can do grape juice. Even if grape juice is too sweet for you, you can also dilute it with water if need be. But it is proper to have the correct amount, but the correct amount is, again, not that extensive. So if you start with a very large glass, you're already looking for trouble. Better to use a glass of a reasonable size, and then you can fulfill the mitzvah properly and with pleasure as well, with enjoyment as well. If you appreciate good wine, this is an opportunity to buy yourself some quality kosher wine and to enjoy it in the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Another thing to bear in mind is to have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah of recounting the Exodus. The main part of the Seder, other than the meal itself, the main part of the Seder is the account of Yetzias Mitzrayim, what we call the Magid, and that is the fulfillment, again, of a mitzvah min haTorah, a well-known mitzvah, explicitly mentioned in the Torah. V'higada talavin chabayom hahu lemor, you shall say to your son on that day, ba'avur ze asa Hashem li. That is the mitzvah of Magid, of recounting Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's incumbent upon men, upon women, to recount to others, to our children, to our grandchildren, if you're lucky enough to be in that position. I've got grandchildren, but I don't think they're going to be here for Pesach. I barely have any children for Pesach, just Yehuda, if you consider him a child, which he's not. But anyway, for us, he still is, and we'll fulfill the mitzvah, at the Seder. But it doesn't have to be your own progeny. It's a mitzvah to recount it to whoever is there. Even a person who's on his own can fulfill the mitzvah, maybe a bit lonely, to recall Yetzias Mitzrayim. And when you do so, you should have in mind that I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of recalling Yetzias Mitzrayim. And this is, I think, as well known, that this really is the essence of the Seder Night experience, other than the technical consumption of the wine and the matzah, the moror, in ancient times, the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb as well. But the content of the Seder experience is to recall and to recount and to discuss. I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit further. In order for the experience to be as successful and as enjoyable and as meaningful and as memorable as it can be, requires some preparation in advance, some strategy. Obviously, coming to this year is part of your preparation, I hope. If you come tomorrow night, I hope you will. We'll have more preparation in terms of content and Seder inspiration. But let's talk about some tactical matters as well. So it's important to think about strategies for engaging with children and guests and members of your family as well. So for the children, prizes, surprises, reading, singing, that is to say, to call on the children to read. It doesn't have to be necessarily from the Haggadah, depending on the age and the interest. Maybe the child has his own Haggadah that he's made in school, or there may be something even from another text which is pertinent, which you can ask the child to read. If you prepare it with him ahead of time, then all the better. Singing, obviously, is engaging and enjoyable. Of course, the Manishtana, the 4 questions. In our Seder, we have the 4 questions. Actually, we have a book with the 4 questions, Manishtana, in about 20 or 25 different languages. But besides the book, we always invite guests who are proficient in other languages to say the Manishtana in their language. And over the years, we've had a lot of exotic languages in that way. Some memorable languages. It's fun, and it expresses the idea of the universal nature of the Seder experience, and Jews have been, and in some cases are still, scattered to the ends of the earth. In fact, my own children are scattered to the ends of the earth, and well, I think they all speak English now, but they can employ. Jews historically have made use of all the different languages. Actually, Tosfos quotes one of the Balei Tosfos who lived in London, that he would translate the Haggadah for his wife, who was perhaps not proficient in Hebrew, into French, actually, even though they lived in London, but they spoke French. And so definitely the Manishtana should be said in languages that a person understands. So in our family, we've got Hebrew, of course, we've got English, we've got Yiddish, we have a Dr. Seuss version as well. And at our Pesach table, Seder table of the years, lots of different languages. The Afikomen is such a brilliant device to engage children, to stimulate the children, to keep them interested and engaged and excited. Different families have different customs about the Afikomen, putting it away, hiding it. The children hide it. The father has to find it. The father hides it. The children seek it. It keeps the children stimulated, excited, and enthused, until the Afikomen is consumed. I know I've repeated before, but it's one of my favorite stories from Rebbe Ruthie. Before I met her, when she was single, she was at the Seder of Rabbi Simcha Wasserman, Zichron Levracha, who had at his Seder a number of guests, boys from Yeshiva, and maybe some neighbors as well. Sadly, they had no children, the Wassermans, but they had a lot of guests at their Seder. Ruthie was among them. And in Yerushalayim, she was a seminary girl, and she stole the Afikoman. She was the youngest one there at the time, and so she pilfered the Afikoman. And when it came time to eat the Afikoman, the rabbi was aware that she had taken it, and he said to her, "Ruthie, what do I have to give you to get back the Afikoman?" It's according to the minhag that the Baal HaSeder has to ransom the Afikoman. So she said, "How could I have the chutzpah to ask the Rosh Yeshiva for something, to ransom the Afikomen from me?" So he said, "With the same chutzpah you had to steal it in the first place." So this is something which is a time-honored tradition, great for exciting and enthusing the children. I could tell you some experiences of my own childhood, but now's not the time. For the adults, strategies for engaging the adults, again, reading, singing, questions, answers, discussion, innovation, Seder memories, to ask your guests, or even to reflect in your own recollection of Seder memories, a memorable Seder you may have had, or maybe you've heard about, maybe a family memory from previous generations. These are things that bring it to life and make the Seder exciting and memorable and engaging. Just have a few minutes left. Erev Tavshilin. So we often do not have an opportunity to speak about Erev Tavshilin. I'd like to do so just briefly now. Erev Tavshilin is a halachic device which makes it halachically possible, to prepare food on Yom Tov for the next day, which is Shabbos. So on Yom Tov, we can cook food for Yom Tov. That's true for the first day of Yom Tov, it's true for the second day of Yom Tov. I'm not allowed to prepare on Yom Tov for the next day because, as I mentioned earlier about Shabbos, Shabbos has its own importance. Yom Tov has its own importance. Not only that, but it's not just a matter of preparation, but the permission to cook on Yom Tov is in order to enjoy the Yom Tov. So if I don't have hot food and I enjoy hot food, as most people do, then I'm allowed to cook hot food on Yom Tov so that I can enjoy Yom Tov. I'm not allowed to cook hot food on Yom Tov for a subsequent occasion for after Yom Tov. Now, when you've got 2 days Yom Tov, as we have in the diaspora, so on the first day Yom Tov, I cook for the first day Yom Tov. On the second day Yom Tov, I cook for the second day Yom Tov. Of course, nowadays with refrigeration and other modern conveniences, it may not be necessary to actually cook on Yom Tov at all, but I still want to heat the food on Yom Tov, for example. Problem is that on Shabbos, I cannot heat or cook food for Shabbos, or certainly not for any other day. On Yom Tov, which is Friday, how do I cook food on Yom Tov, which is Friday, for Shabbos, which follows? Now, that's not an issue at the beginning of Pesach because Friday is Erev Pesach. As we said, Pesach is Shabbos and Sunday. But the last days of Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach is Friday, the 8th day of Pesach is Shabbos. So it becomes necessary to make use of the halachic device known as Eruv Tavshilin, and you can find it in the Art Scroll Seder page 654. It's important to remember to do it on Thursday, the Thursday of Chol HaMoed Pesach, Erev Yom Tov, of the 7th day of Pesach, and that will enable you to cook on the 7th day of Pesach, Friday, in preparation for Shabbos. The cooking should be done early enough in the afternoon so that it is completed and the food is ready to eat sometime before Shabbos begins. And I don't want to go into right now the reason for that, but the actual mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin can be done fairly easily. Many use a hard-boiled egg, something cooked and something baked, like matzah. It's probably the best choice. I was going to say a challah roll, not a good idea for Chol HaMoed Pesach. So take a matzah, take a hard-boiled egg, and you designate that as the Erev Tavshilin. There's a short declaration, and there's a bracha to be said as well, and you can find it in your Art Scroll Seder. Important not to forget, for Thursday of Chol HaMoed Pesach. Just have a few more minutes, but we're nearly at the end. Actually, we pretty much are at the end. I'm really up to any questions, but I just would like to mention, I've got it here in my notes, tomorrow, as I said at the beginning, same time, 8 o'clock on the same link, we're going to do 30 minutes of Seder inspiration, delight your guests and impress your family with some new ideas to share for the Pesach Seder, and that's going to be tomorrow night.